All right, so this is part two of my Life as a Reader series. It's basically the story of how I got overeducated and realized I didn't know jack squat about anything. But at least it reminds me of how far I have to go as a reader and a learner and a language learner, and how far I have to go as a digester of interesting things about life and culture. All right, so we left off talking about Maupassant, and we got Cormac McCarthy on there, The Road. I think this book's all right. I haven't really read too many of his other things. A couple books by Marshall McLuhan. Gutenberg Galaxy absolutely blows me away. I think that that's a must-have for any nonfiction collection. Here's a Misspelled Medium is The Massage. Of course, should be Message. Larry McMurtry, Last Picture Show, classic adaptation. Painted in Florence and Siena after the Black Death, famous art historical book. Millard Meese was written originally, I think, in the 50s. Melville, Arthur Miller, Stephen Millhauser. It's been a long time since I read these books. I enjoyed them greatly when I did, especially Martin Dressler, the way that he creates this kind of steampunk slash art deco amazing department store of your dreams is so interesting. Gone with the Wind, fantastic book, so beautifully written. Michael Moore, Toni Morrison. Let's see what's on the next page. One of these time traveler books, Ian Mortimer. Lewis Mumford, who's kind of the father of modern urbanism in some ways. One of these guys who knows a little bit about everything. Now we got Murakami, maybe the writer who I've read the most of. My Murakami choices are influenced by the order that I read his books, and I actually read A Wild Sheep Chase first. So I always find myself recommending this one and Wind Up Bird, of course, which I probably think is his best book, but read 1Q84, I was blown away by, even despite its just okay reviews. Also, South of the Border, West of the Sun, which I don't think is on here, but is also a great book. All right, let's see what else we got. Book about monasteries in Spain. A couple books by Cal Newport, who's basically the prophet of digital minimalism and, our experiences as inhabitants of the digital culture. A couple Nietzsche, Things I Carried. On to the next page. Obama, Juan Carlos Onetti, who was writing about a generation before Benedetti. A Brief Life, La Vida Breve, is incredible book. A little slow moving, but he creates this alternate city, I guess, Santa Maria, that I think is based off of Montevideo. Susan Orlean, library book about the fire in 1986 at LA Public Library. Ortega Gasset, who's maybe my favorite 20th century philosopher. George Orwell, Down and Out in Paris and London, Burmese Days, 1984, of course. I'm a big fan of Homage to Catalonia, actually, um, but probably don't like it as much as Burmese Days. So Burmese Days, I guess, is my Orwell dark horse. John Osborne, Zhuangzi, Panofsky, maybe my favorite art historian. Zhivago, Cesare Pavese, The Devil in the Hills, fantastic book. His poetry is maybe even more well known than his fiction. Octavio Paz, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Sylvia Plath, some Plato and Plutarch, Terry Pluto, who also wrote a book about the ABA. This book, Tall Tales, is about the early story of the MBA during mainly during the 50s into the early 60s. Wonderful stories, hilarious journalism. Pushkin, Godfather, Ayn Rand, Ayn Rand. 10 Days That Shook the World, which I don't know if that was on here before. Oh no, it was Books That Changed the World. 10 Days That Shook the World is the book about the Russian Revolution. John Reed, the guy who was in Mexico in 1916 and in Russia in 1917, saw the two great revolutions of the 20th century. Two of the great Cadillac Desert, great book. Remarque, read this book half a dozen times. Oliver Sacks, Salinger, who I like Seymour in Introduction. It's probably my favorite Salinger. I read too much of him in my early 20s. I don't read that much of him these days. Saramago, Sartre's memoir, or I guess autobiography, as they say here. Fantastic book. Sedaris, always worth a laugh. Got some Shakespeare on here for good measure. Tree Grows in Brooklyn, Jordan Rules, Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Fantastic book, easy to read in one sitting. It's an absolute must read. Sophocles, Kevin Starr's Histories of California. There's about eight of them. I've been recently reading the one about progressivism and then the one about the Great Depression. This was the first one that I read, the one about the 90s, and then this being the first one is probably the best one. But I mean, he's the unofficial historian of California, so he's a must read. Steinbeck, was always obsessed with Steinbeck. Journal of a Novel and Working Days are must reads for any writer. East of Eden, probably the first big novel I really enjoyed, really understood, is something I just powered through, and it was a 600-page book I read for pleasure. Great movie as well. Stendhal, Treasure Island, Zeno's Conscience, which is a funny book, a little dated, I mean, for 120 years ago. Under Milkwood, Dylan Thomas, one of a kind. Under Milkwood's a great play. There's some great monologues. The opening monologue is wonderful. Thoreau, Thucydides, Tocqueville, Tolstoy. Got about five War and Pieces on there. Confederacy of Dunces, which is probably my favorite post 1960 novel. Maybe it was officially written by him in around 1960, so we could say post World War II even. I think it's way funnier than Catch 22. Fathers and Sons, must read. Life on the Mississippi, must read. Like I said in one of my earlier videos, I went to Hannibal. At the Mississippi River, there's a placard with a quote from Life on the Mississippi. When you're there in Hannibal, go down to the riverside, check it out. Lao Tzu, Tragic Sense of Life. Vasari, the original art historian, well-known painter in his own right. Vico, The New Science, such a wonderfully idiosyncratic book, kind of straddles philosophy and religion, cultural theory. Vonnegut, Robert Walser, Jacob van Gutten. Oh my gosh, such a good book. Um, Creepy but fascinating. One of a kind. It's a must read, Jacob van Gutten. All right, we got some Cornell West. We're kind of wrapping it up here. Day of the Locust, probably my favorite Hollywood novel. Maybe, yeah, 100%. Um, Kind of one of these Let the Buyer Beware where it rings so true to LA even today, 80 years later, 85 years later. I think it was originally published in around 1940. Ethan Frome, I read Age of Innocence probably first. Actually, recently watched the Scorsese version with Daniel Day Lewis. Really enjoyed the movie way more. Maybe I probably held off on watching it because I enjoyed the book and I don't want to feel negatively about a Scorsese. Maybe something I thought was a lesser Scorsese, even though it's totally not the case. John White, famous art historian. You got to have Wa about Japanese baseball. Great book. Whitman, the first modern poet. Stoner by John Williams, a book that got a lot more popular over the past 10, 15 years. Great, great novel. Great novel for writers. Tennessee Williams, Secret History, Procopius. One of my favorite underrated primary source histories. The Garlic Ballads, Mo Yan, fantastic book. I think that this was the book that he got in the most trouble with at the time. He's kind of known as a writer who has, I guess, eschewed political controversy for the most part. Howard Zinn. And then we're wrapping up the list with Stefan Zweig. Chess Story, phenomenal. Post Office Girl, also very good. The World of Yesterday is just a magical book. The way that he talks about Venice at the turn of the century, it makes you want to go back in time. Beautiful writer. It's amazing that he's so well known in non-English speaking countries, but so relatively unknown in especially America. I would assume he's not super well read in the UK either, but I don't know that for certain. All right, so here's the list. I will be making additional videos with some books that either weren't on here or maybe a couple movies videos at a library branch. I know they don't like filming inside libraries, so maybe I'll try to do something surreptitiously. But for now, here's 397 book recommendations.